Welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, A Fractured Foundation. Daniel Hayes stood in his office at Hayes Enterprises, watching his brother Blake charm yet another potential client. Through the glass partition, he observed as Blake leaned back in his chair, his infectious laugh carrying through the walls. The client, a distinguished woman in her 50s, was already caught in Blake's web of charisma. Just like high school, Danny muttered, turning back to his computer screen filled with construction specifications and cost analyses. The same patterns had followed them from childhood, Blake dazzling everyone with his natural charm, while Danny worked diligently behind the scenes. The memory of their mother's voice echoed in his mind. "Why can't you be more like your brother, Danny? Look how well he connects with people." The words still stung, even 20 years later. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Hayes?" His assistant Sarah poked her head in. "The Reynolds contract needs your review before the deadline tomorrow." Danny nodded, grateful for the distraction. "Thanks, Sarah. I'll have it done by end of day." As he immersed himself in the contract details, the sound of his brother's success continued to filter through the walls. Danny had spent countless hours developing the proposal for this project, meticulously planning each phase. Yet Blake would undoubtedly take credit for securing the deal. His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Dinner at 7? Blake invited us to that new French restaurant downtown." Danny's jaw tightened. Of course, Blake had made reservations at the most exclusive restaurant in town, the one with a 3-month waiting list. He typed back, "Can't. Need to finish the Reynolds contract." Olivia's response was immediate, "Always working. Blake says you need to learn to delegate more." The familiar tension headache began to build behind his eyes. Danny set his phone face down and returned to the contract, but the words blurred together as memories flooded back. He remembered the day his father handed Blake the keys to the new sports car on his 16th birthday. Danny had received driving lessons and a used sedan when his time came. "Be practical, son," his father had said. "That's your strength." The office door burst open, startling Danny from his reverie. Blake strode in, radiating satisfaction. "Danny boy, you should have been there. Mrs. Patterson is completely on board. She loves our vision for the community center project." "Our vision?" Danny couldn't keep the edge from his voice. "You mean the proposal I spent 3 months developing?" Blake waved his hand dismissively. Details. The important thing is we got her to sign. You know I always give you credit where it matters. Right?" Danny muttered. "Just like you gave me credit for the Riverside Development Project? Are you still hung up on that?" Blake perched on Danny's desk, disrupting the carefully organized documents. "Come on, brother. You know presentation is just as important as preparation. You're the brains, I'm the face, it's why we work so well together." Danny straightened the papers Blake had displaced. "Is that what you tell Olivia too?" Something flickered in Blake's eyes. Amusement? Guilt? It disappeared too quickly to read. "Speaking of your lovely wife, we're having dinner at Le Petit tonight. You should come. It'll be good for you to step away from these contracts for once. Some of us have to actually work, Blake. The company doesn't run on charm alone." Blake stood, straightening his perfectly tailored suit. "Suit yourself, brother. But you know what they say about all work and no play." He headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Mom and Dad are coming to dinner too. Dad wants to discuss the urban development project." Danny's head snapped up. "The Henderson contract? That's my project." "Was your project," Blake corrected with a sympathetic smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Dad thinks we need a more dynamic approach." "Don't worry. I'll make sure you're still involved in the execution phase." The door closed behind Blake, leaving Danny alone with the bitter taste of betrayal in his mouth. He opened his desk drawer, pulling out the proposal he'd been refining for months. The Henderson contract could have been his moment to prove himself, to step out of Blake's shadow. His computer chimed with a new email from Olivia. "Blake says you're not coming to dinner. Again. Sometimes I wonder if you even care about spending time with me anymore." Danny's fingers hovered over the keyboard as he considered his response. The early days of their marriage flashed through his mind. Quiet evenings at home, long conversations about their dreams, The way Olivia used to look at him with admiration when he spoke about his projects. When had that changed? When had she started looking at Blake that way instead? He closed the email without responding and turned back to the Reynolds contract, losing himself in the familiar comfort of numbers and specifications. At least these made sense. At least these couldn't betray him. Hours later, Danny sat in his darkened office, the Reynolds contract finally complete. The building was quiet, most employees having left hours ago. He should head home, but the thought of facing Olivia's disappointment kept him rooted to his chair. His phone lit up with a text from Cassie Russo, the architect he'd been working with on several projects. Just reviewed your revisions to the community center designs. Brilliant solutions to the space constraints. Want to discuss over coffee tomorrow? A small smile tugged at his lips. At least someone appreciated his work for what it was, not just as a foundation for Blake's grand performances. He gathered his things, finally ready to face the evening ahead. As he walked to his car, he spotted Blake's vehicle still in the parking lot, unusual for his brother to work late. Danny's steps slowed as he approached the executive level where his office was located. The sound of laughter, familiar, intimate laughter, stopped him in his tracks. His hand trembled slightly as he pushed open the door to his office suite. The sight that greeted him shattered his world into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Olivia was perched on his desk, where he'd spent countless hours working to build their future. Blake stood between her legs, his hands tangled in her hair, their lips locked in a passionate embrace. Time seemed to stop. The only sound was the blood rushing in Danny's ears and the echo of his wife's betrayal ringing through his mind. They broke apart at his entrance, but neither had the decency to look ashamed. Instead, Blake's expression held a hint of triumph, while Olivia's showed only relief, as if Danny's discovery had freed her from a burden she'd been carrying. Danny, Blake spoke first, his voice carrying that same confident tone he used to close deals. We didn't expect you back tonight. Clearly, Danny managed to say, his voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos erupting inside him. Olivia slid off the desk, smoothing her dress. We need to talk, Danny. This isn't working anymore. And this. Danny gestured between them, his hand trembling with suppressed rage. How long has this been working? Don't make this uglier than it needs to be, brother. Blake stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Olivia, protective, possessive. These things happen. You must have noticed how unhappy Olivia's been. Danny laughed, a harsh sound that seemed to surprise even himself. Unhappy? Is that what you told yourself to justify fucking my wife, Blake? Another thing you just had to take from me? I haven't been happy for a long time, Danny. Olivia spoke up, her voice taking on that reasonable tone she used when explaining things to clients. You're always working, always focused on the next project. When was the last time you really looked at me? Really saw me? I saw you. Danny's voice was quiet now, dangerous. I saw you every time you compared our life to Blake's. Every time you wished for more excitement, more luxury, more of everything I was working to give you. Working, always working. Olivia shook her head. That's all you know how to do, Danny. You're so focused on proving yourself that you forgot how to live. Blake moved closer to Olivia, placing his hand on her lower back. The gesture was casual, intimate, speaking of a familiarity that must have developed over months, maybe years. This doesn't have to affect the business, Blake said, slipping into his negotiator voice. We can handle this professionally. The Henderson contract is coming up, and we need to present a united front. The mention of the contract ignited something in Danny's chest, a burning rage that consumed the last traces of his restraint. Get out, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Both of you, get out of my office. Danny, be reasonable, Blake started, but Danny cut him off. Reasonable? Danny's laugh was hollow. Like you were reasonable when you seduced my wife? Like you were reasonable when you took credit for my work year after year? He stepped closer to his brother, noting with satisfaction how Blake took an instinctive step back. You want to talk about the Henderson contract? Go ahead. Take it. Take everything, Blake. That's what you do best, isn't it? But remember this moment. Remember what it feels like to watch your world crumble, because I promise you, one day, you'll feel exactly what I'm feeling right now. Olivia grabbed her purse, her hand shaking slightly. You're proving my point, Danny. This darkness in you, this bitterness, it's always been there, hasn't it? Blake helps me feel alive. He shows me what life can be when you're not afraid to reach for what you want. Danny turned to his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and saw her clearly for the first time. The woman he'd loved, the future he'd planned, the life he'd built. It had all been a carefully constructed illusion. Get out, he repeated, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. Take what you want from the house. I won't be going back there. They left, their footsteps echoing through the empty office. Danny stood in the darkness, surrounded by the remnants of his shattered life, and made a silent vow. They thought they knew him, the quiet, hard-working younger brother who would accept this betrayal with the same resignation he'd accepted everything else in his life. They thought his darkness was a weakness. They would learn just how wrong they were. The night stretched before him, full of possibilities and promises of revenge. Danny Hayes sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and began to plan. Chapter 2: Exile and Transformation. The Hayes family mansion loomed before Danny, its manicured lawns and pristine facade mocking the chaos that waited inside. He gripped his steering wheel, knuckles white, before finally stepping out into the crisp morning air. His parents had summoned him for what they called an important family discussion. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. His mother, Margaret Hayes, sat rigidly on the antique sofa, while his father, Richard Hayes, stood by the fireplace, his face etched with disappointment. Daniel, his father began, using his full name. Never a good sign. We need to discuss the situation with Blake and Olivia. Danny remained standing, his hands in his pockets. What's there to discuss? Your golden boy betrayed his brother. Again. Don't take that tone, Margaret snapped, then softened her voice. We're trying to handle this delicately. Delicately? Danny's laugh was bitter. Like how Blake and Olivia handled their affair in my office? Richard cleared his throat. Son, we understand you're hurt, but we need to think about the company. Hayes Enterprises can't afford a scandal right now. The company, Danny repeated. Of course. That's all that matters, isn't it? His father pulled out a folder from his desk. We've prepared a settlement offer. It's generous. Enough for you to start fresh somewhere else. Danny took the folder, but didn't open it. You want me to leave? It's for the best, Margaret interjected. Blake and Olivia are already married. They'll be expecting their first child in 7 months. The folder crumpled in Danny's grip. 7 months. The betrayal ran deeper than he'd imagined. I see, he said, his voice dangerously calm. And what about my shares in the company? My position? Richard shifted uncomfortably. The settlement includes fair compensation for your shares. As for your position, Blake will be taking over your projects, including the Henderson contract. Son, Richard's voice held a note of warning. This is the best solution for everyone. Take the money, move away, start fresh. Danny looked at his parents, really looked at them. His mother, always perfectly composed, avoiding his gaze. His father, the businessman to the core, treating his son's devastation like another corporate merger. You're choosing him. Again, we're choosing what's best for the family, Margaret insisted. For the company, Danny placed the crumpled folder on the coffee table. The family? I was never really part of it, was I? Just the spare, the backup plan in case Blake failed. That's not true, Margaret protested, but her eyes told a different story. Keep your money, Danny said. Keep your company. Keep your perfect son and his pregnant wife. But remember this moment, because one day, you'll realize what you've thrown away. He turned to leave, but his father's voice stopped him. Daniel, don't be foolish. Take the settlement. You have nothing without it. Danny paused at the door. You're wrong, Dad. I have something Blake will never have, the truth about who he really is. And one day, everyone else will see it too. He left the mansion, ignoring his mother's calls. In his car, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Sarah? It's Danny. I need you to gather some information for me. Everything you can find about our overseas subsidiaries, particularly the shell companies Blake set up last year. Yes, I know it's confidential. That's exactly why I need it. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Danny moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of town, away from the affluent neighborhoods where his family resided. He watched from afar as Blake and Olivia moved into his former home, their social media filled with pictures of their perfect life. One evening, as Danny sat surrounded by financial documents and company records, his phone buzzed with a text from Blake. "Dinner party this weekend. Mom insists you should come. Show everyone there are no hard feelings." Minutes later, Olivia added, "It would mean a lot to your parents. Plus, you can meet some of my friends from the country club. Maybe find someone new." Danny didn't respond, but he saved the messages. More evidence of their arrogance, their belief that they had broken him completely. He focused instead on the documents before him. Sarah had come through with detailed records of Blake's business dealings. The numbers didn't add up. Large sums moving through offshore accounts, questionable contracts, potential kickbacks. Nothing concrete enough to prove wrongdoing, but enough to start building a case. A knock at his door interrupted his analysis. Danny opened it to find Cassie Russo, the architect, holding a stack of blueprints. "You missed our meeting," she said, pushing past him into the apartment. "And you're not returning my calls." "I've been busy." Cassie looked around the sparse apartment, taking in the wall covered in financial documents and sticky notes. "I can see that. What I can't see is why you're hiding here instead of fighting back." "I'm not hiding," Danny protested. "No." Cassie raised an eyebrow. "Then why haven't you shown up to challenge Blake's changes to the Henderson project? The sustainability features you designed are being stripped away, replaced with cheaper alternatives that'll fall apart in 5 years. Danny turned away, but Cassie grabbed his arm. The Danny Hayes I know wouldn't let his brother destroy something he believed in. He wouldn't run away. That Danny Hayes was naive, he said. He trusted people. Look where that got him. Cassie's grip tightened. No, that Danny Hayes was brilliant. He saw possibilities others missed. He cared about building something that would last. She thrust the blueprints at him. Your brother's changes will compromise the entire structure. But you knew that already, didn't you? You're letting him fail. Danny took the blueprints, studying the modifications. Sometimes you have to let things fall apart before you can rebuild them properly. Cassie stared at him for a long moment. You're planning something? It wasn't a question, but Danny answered anyway. I'm planning everything. 3 months passed. Danny disappeared into the mountains, leaving behind only a forwarding address for his mail. He found a cabin, remote and isolated, where he could focus without distraction. The transformation began slowly. Physical training to channel his anger and sharpen his focus. Hours studying financial markets, corporate law, and psychological manipulation. He analyzed his past failures, identifying patterns in his behavior that others had exploited. One morning, as Danny chopped wood outside his cabin, a sleek black car wound its way up the dirt road. A man stepped out, tall, distinguished, with sharp eyes that seemed to cut through pretense. Daniel Hayes, the man said, I've been watching your moves in the market. Interesting choices for someone in self-imposed exile. Danny set down his axe. Who are you? Arthur Sterling. The name carried weight in financial circles. I knew your father back when Hayes Enterprises was just a small construction company. Now I'm more interested in knowing you. Why? Arthur's smile was razor sharp. Because you're not running away, are you? You're preparing. The question is, are you preparing for revenge or something bigger? Danny studied the older man. What's the difference? Revenge is emotional. Messy. It satisfies nothing but pride. Arthur stepped closer. But transformation, real, calculated transformation, that's an art. One I might be willing to teach. He held out a business card. If you're interested in learning how to truly destroy someone, come to this address tomorrow. Bring nothing but your mind and your determination. Danny took the card, turning it over in his hands. And what do you get out of this? Let's say I have a vested interest in watching the mighty fall. Arthur returned to his car. Oh, and Daniel? We're something suitable for dinner. My chef doesn't appreciate casual attire. As the car disappeared down the mountain road, Danny looked at the card again. The address was in the city's financial district, far from the construction world he knew. That night, he dreamed of Blake and Olivia's smug faces, of his parents' disappointment, of the life they had stolen from him. But for the first time, the anger didn't consume him. Instead, it focused him, sharpened his resolve. The next morning, Danny Hayes looked in the mirror and saw not the betrayed brother or the abandoned husband, but the man he would become. He packed a suit, locked up the cabin, and headed down the mountain. The transformation had begun. Chapter 3. The Prodigal Son Returns. 3 years could change many things. Daniel Hayesworth mused as his Mercedes glided through the familiar streets of his hometown. The buildings remained the same, but he viewed them through different eyes now, calculating their value, assessing their potential, seeing opportunities where he once saw only memories. His phone buzzed with a message from Cassie. Just landed. Meeting you at the reunion? Wouldn't miss it. He typed back, a small smile playing on his lips. The annual Hayes family reunion was a tradition spanning generations, hosted at his parents' estate. In previous years, Danny had dreaded these gatherings, feeling like an outsider in his own family. This year was different. This year, he was returning as Daniel Hayesworth, the mysterious business mogul who'd accumulated a fortune through shrewd investments and strategic acquisitions. He adjusted his Italian suit, a far cry from the department store clothes he'd worn in his previous life. Arthur Sterling had taught him the importance of presentation, how appearance could be wielded as both weapon and armor. Remember, Arthur had told him during their last meeting, power isn't about who you are. It's about who they believe you to be. The estate came into view, its sprawling grounds filled with expensive cars and well-dressed guests. Danny parked his Mercedes next to a familiar Range Rover, Blake's vehicle, still bearing the Hayes Enterprises logo. As he stepped out, he heard the excited whispers. Is that Daniel Hayes? I heard he's made millions in private equity. They say he owns half the commercial property downtown. He ignored them, his attention drawn to another car pulling up, a sleek Audi with Cassie Russo at the wheel. She emerged, stunning in a navy blue dress that spoke of understated elegance. Their eyes met, and she gave him a subtle nod. They had rehearsed this moment carefully. Daniel, his mother's voice cut through the murmurs. Margaret Hayes approached, trying to mask her surprise at his transformed appearance. We weren't sure you'd come, and missed the family tradition? His smile was polite but distant. How could I? She hesitated, then leaned in for a hug. Danny returned it briefly, noting how she tensed at his coolness. Your father will be pleased, she said, smoothing her already perfect dress. We've been worried about you. No need, Danny replied. I've been quite successful in my exile. The word made her flinch. Good. Inside, the reunion was in full swing. Danny moved through the crowd with practiced ease, exchanging pleasantries and business cards. Arthur's lessons in social manipulation had served him well. He knew exactly how to make each conversation serve his purposes. He spotted Blake holding court near the bar, Olivia at his side. Their child, a toddler with Blake's features, played nearby. Danny felt a momentary pang, quickly suppressed. This wasn't about the past anymore. Danny boy. Blake's voice boomed across the room. The prodigal brother returns. Heads turned as Blake approached, his trademark charm on full display. Olivia followed, her confident stride faltering slightly as she took in Danny's transformation. Still single? Blake's grin was sharp. No one managed to replace my lovely wife yet. A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the watching crowd. Danny merely smiled, remembering Arthur's advice. Let them reveal their own insecurities. Your silence is more powerful than any retort. You're still that sad guy we ditched, right? Olivia added, her voice carrying a hint of desperation beneath the mockery. She needed to believe he was unchanged, needed to justify her choices. Before Danny could respond, a heavy hand slammed down on the nearby table. Uncle Robert, their father's younger brother, stood up abruptly. Shut up, he growled, his face flushed with anger. There's something important you two need to know before humiliating him further. The room fell silent. Robert had always been the family's moral compass, the one person who spoke truth regardless of consequences. Uncle Robert, Blake started, but Robert cut him off. No, boy. You've done enough talking. He turned to address the gathered family members. 3 months ago, your father called me to witness a transaction. A significant one. Danny watched as Blake's confident smile began to fade. Hayes Enterprises has a new majority shareholder, Robert continued. Your parents sold their controlling interest to a consortium of investment firms. He paused, his eyes fixed on Blake. Firms owned by your brother. The color drained from Blake's face. Olivia grabbed his arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his sleeve. That's impossible, Blake whispered. Dad would never. Your father isn't a fool, Blake, Robert said. He saw what your mismanagement was doing to the company. The questionable contracts, the depleted reserves, the corners you cut on the Henderson project. Danny stepped forward, his movement drawing all eyes. The papers were finalized this morning. Hayes Enterprises is under new management. You're lying, Olivia spat, but her voice trembled. Ask them yourself. Danny gestured to where his parents stood in the doorway, their expressions grim. Richard Hayes moved to stand beside his younger son. It's true. The board approved the transfer unanimously. Dad, you can't. Blake's voice cracked. I'm your heir. The company was supposed to be mine. The company needs strong leadership, Richard replied. Someone who understands the value of hard work, of building something lasting. He turned to Danny. Someone who learned those lessons the hard way. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Danny maintained his composure, but inside, a small part of him, the part that was still that betrayed brother, savored the moment. You're both removed from your positions, effective immediately, Danny announced. Your personal belongings will be packed and delivered to you. You can't do this, Blake grabbed Danny's arm. I'm your brother. Danny looked down at Blake's hand, then back at his brother's face. You made your choice 3 years ago, Blake. Now you get to live with it. He turned to address the stunned gathering. Hayes Enterprises is entering a new era. Those who wish to be part of it are welcome to stay. Those who don't, he glanced at Blake and Olivia, should leave now. The silence was deafening. Blake stood frozen, his world crumbling around him, just as Danny's had 3 years ago. Olivia's carefully maintained composure cracked, tears streaming down her face. Cassie appeared at Danny's side, her presence a steady anchor. The cars are ready, she murmured. Danny nodded. Security will escort you out, he told Blake and Olivia. Your access cards have already been deactivated. As they were led away, Danny caught fragments of their shocked protests, their desperate attempts to maintain dignity. He felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only a cold certainty that justice had finally been served. His father approached, looking older than Danny remembered. The company is yours, Richard said quietly. Do better than we did. Danny met his father's gaze. I already am. The reunion dissolved into chaos after that, family members rushing to align themselves with the new power structure. Danny handled it all with the practiced ease Arthur had taught him, making mental notes of who showed loyalty and who hesitated. Later that night, in his new office at Hayes Enterprises, Danny stood looking out over the city. Cassie worked quietly at the conference table, reviewing project proposals. Phase 1 is complete, she said without looking up. Are you ready for what comes next? Danny touched the window, his reflection overlaying the city lights. The man who stared back at him was neither the naive brother nor the bitter exile. He was something new, something forged in betrayal and tempered by determination. I'm ready, he said. This is just the beginning. In his mind, he could hear Arthur Sterling's voice. Remember, Daniel, true power isn't in the victory itself. It's in what you build from the ashes of the old order. The night stretched before him, full of possibilities. Danny Hayes, now Daniel Hayesworth, had returned. And this time, he was here to stay. Chapter 4. Playing the Long Game. The Hayes Enterprises boardroom buzzed with tension as Daniel Hayesworth took his seat at the head of the table. The morning's agenda lay before each board member, a complete restructuring of the company's leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, Danny began, his voice carrying the quiet authority Arthur Sterling had taught him to cultivate. We're here to discuss the future of Hayes Enterprises. Blake sat halfway down the table, his usual confident smirk replaced by barely concealed anxiety. He hadn't slept much since the family reunion revelation. The dark circles under his eyes betrayed that. First order of business, Danny continued, sliding folders across the polished table. A complete audit of our recent projects, particularly the Henderson development. Blake's hand tightened around his pen. That's my project. I've already submitted all the necessary documentation. Yes, I've reviewed it. Danny pressed a button on his laptop, and the screen behind him filled with spreadsheets. Would you care to explain the discrepancies in the materials budget? Specifically, the substitution of lower-grade materials than what was specified in the original contracts. The board members shuffled through their papers, murmurs of concern spreading through the room. Blake's face reddened. Those changes were approved. By whom? Danny interrupted. Because I have the original specifications here, approved by our clients, calling for materials that cost roughly 40% more than what you actually used. Sarah, Danny's former assistant who'd remained loyal during his exile, distributed another set of documents. The full audit report shows similar patterns across 5 major projects in the last 2 years. Blake stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. This is a witch hunt. You can't just come in here and... I can and I will. Danny's voice remained calm. You're being reassigned, Blake. Effective immediately. Reassigned? I'm the vice president of operations. You were, Danny corrected. As of today, you'll be supervising maintenance at our smaller properties. I believe the Milton Street complex needs attention. The Milton Street complex was a small strip mall on the outskirts of town, the kind of property that generated steady but minimal income. It was a dramatic fall from Blake's previous position. This is ridiculous, Blake sputtered. Dad won't stand for this. Dad no longer has a say in company matters, Danny reminded him. Unless you prefer to resign? Blake looked around the table, seeking support from his former allies. He found none. These people had witnessed his arrogance, had covered for his mistakes, had endured his condescension. Now they smelled blood in the water. After Blake stormed out, Danny continued the meeting, outlining his vision for the company's future. He announced promotions for several talented employees who'd been overlooked during Blake's tenure, implemented new accountability measures, and introduced Cassie as the company's new head of design and innovation. Later that afternoon, Olivia appeared in Danny's office, wearing a dress that cost more than most employees' monthly salary. Danny, she purred, perching on the edge of his desk like she used to do years ago. We need to talk, Mrs. Hayes, he replied, not looking up from his computer. You'll need to schedule an appointment with my secretary. Don't be like that. She leaned closer. What happened between us? I made a mistake. I see that now. Danny finally looked at her, really looked at her. 3 years ago, her beauty had consumed him. Now he saw the calculation behind her perfect makeup, the desperation in her practiced smile. A mistake, he asked softly. Like the mistake you made with the Robertson family's trust fund? Olivia's face paled. What are you talking about? Blake gave you access to client accounts. You diverted funds to support your lifestyle. Shopping sprees, spa treatments, that trip to Paris last spring. Danny pulled up a file on his computer. Did you think nobody would notice? That's not. I can explain. Save it for the ethics committee. Danny cut her off. Unless you'd like to tell me more about Blake's creative accounting practices? Olivia's mask cracked. He'll know if I talk to you. He's in no position to do anything about it, Danny reminded her. Think carefully about your next move, Olivia. Your comfortable lifestyle hangs in the balance. After she left, Cassie entered through the connecting door between their offices. That was cold, she observed. It was necessary, Danny replied. Did you get the files I asked for? Cassie nodded, spreading blueprints across his desk. The Henderson project is worse than we thought. Blake's cost-cutting measures compromised the structural integrity of the entire East Wing. Can it be fixed? Yes, but it'll be expensive. Cassie pointed to several critical areas. We'll need to reinforce these support columns, replace the substandard materials, and possibly redesign portions of the upper floors. Danny studied the plans. Draft a proposal. Include everything needed to make it right, regardless of cost. Hayes Enterprises is going to fix this properly. What about the PR nightmare when this gets out? Let it out, Danny said. We'll position it as the new management's commitment to quality and safety. Blake's reputation will take another hit, but the company will emerge stronger. Over the next few weeks, Danny's changes rippled through Hayes Enterprises. Competent employees flourished under the new merit-based system. Projects moved forward with renewed efficiency. The company's stock price began to climb. Blake, meanwhile, seethed in his new role. The maintenance supervisor's office was a far cry from his former corner suite. His calls to old contacts went unreturned. His business lunches dwindled to solitary sandwiches at his desk. One evening, as Danny worked late, he received an alert from the IT department. Someone had attempted to access restricted files, specifically the documents relating to the Henderson Project audit. The access attempt came from Blake's computer. Danny smiled, remembering Arthur's words. A desperate man will always act predictably. Set the trap, and he'll walk right into it. He picked up his phone. Sarah? Release the Henderson audit to the board tomorrow morning. All of it. And make sure Blake's login attempt is noted in the appendix. The next day, Blake received a formal reprimand for attempting to access confidential documents. It was added to his personnel file, another mark against him, another step down the ladder Danny had designed for his brother's descent. At home that night, Danny reviewed the company's financial reports. Hayes Enterprises was already showing signs of recovery from Blake's mismanagement. The stock price had stabilized, client confidence was returning, and employee morale was improving. His phone buzzed with a text from Cassie. Dinner? I brought takeout to your office. Danny found her in the conference room, surrounded by design proposals for upcoming projects. They ate while discussing work, their conversation flowing easily between professional matters and personal observations. Blake tried to convince the maintenance crew to slack off, Cassie mentioned between bites of pad thai. They reported him immediately. Loyalty works both ways, Danny replied. When you treat people with respect, they return it. Speaking of respect, Cassie pushed a folder toward him. I've been thinking about expanding our sustainable building initiatives. It could help repair some of the damage Blake did to our reputation. Danny reviewed her proposals, impressed by the thoroughness of her research. This was why he trusted her. She saw beyond revenge to the larger picture of what Hayes Enterprises could become. Implement it, he decided, and add a training program for local contractors. Let's build something that lasts. As they worked into the night, Danny realized that his revenge wasn't just about destroying Blake. It was about building something better from the ashes of what his brother had nearly ruined. The game was far from over, but Danny was playing for higher stakes now. Blake's desperation would drive him to make mistakes, and Danny would be ready when he did. Arthur had taught him well. Patience, Daniel. Let your enemy's fear become your weapon. His pride will do your work for you. Chapter 5. Turning the Screws. The Henderson Project presentation room was packed with city officials, investors, and media representatives. Danny stood at the podium, presenting Hayes Enterprises' vision for urban redevelopment. Behind him, digital displays showcased the innovative designs Cassie had developed. Our commitment to sustainable development isn't just about buildings, Danny explained, his voice carrying confidence and conviction. It's about creating spaces that serve the community for generations to come. In the back row, Blake shifted uncomfortably in his maintenance supervisor's uniform. He'd been required to attend, a deliberate move on Danny's part to highlight his brother's fall from grace. I'd like to acknowledge our head of design and innovation, Cassandra Russo. Danny gestured to Cassie, who stood to appreciative applause. Her innovative approach to sustainable architecture has revolutionized our design process. As Cassie took the podium to detail the technical aspects of the project, Danny caught Olivia filming the presentation on her phone. Her social media ambitions had become increasingly obvious. Daily posts about luxury lifestyle, fashion, and what she called entrepreneurial mindset. After the presentation, which received enthusiastic approval from the city council, Danny overheard two investors discussing Olivia's latest social media venture. Did you see her new lifestyle brand launch? One asked. Complete disaster. The products were cheap knockoffs, but she priced them like luxury items. I heard the influencers she paid for endorsements backed out when they saw the quality, the other replied. Something about fake certificates of authenticity? Danny made a mental note to have Sarah investigate further. He'd been monitoring Olivia's attempts to establish herself as a social media mogul, waiting for the right moment to intervene. That evening, his phone buzzed with a message from one of his contacts. Information about OH's past business ventures ready. Multiple failed startups, unpaid vendors, questionable certification claims. Sending files now. Danny forwarded the information to several gossip blogs that had been critical of Olivia's recent venture. By morning, Her social media accounts were flooded with accusations and exposés. "Did you do this?" Cassie asked, showing him the viral posts about Olivia's fraudulent business practices. "I merely ensured the truth came to light," Danny replied. "She built her brand on lies. It was bound to collapse eventually." Meanwhile, Blake's financial situation was deteriorating rapidly. Danny's network had informed him of his brother's desperate attempts to secure loans. His credit cards maxed out trying to maintain appearances. Mr. Hayesworth, his financial analyst, reported, "Your brother attempted to secure a loan using his Hayes Enterprises stock as collateral. However, since the shares are now essentially worthless, make sure all local banks have copies of his credit report," Danny instructed, "and monitor his gambling activities at the Riverboat Casino." Blake's desperation became evident in his work. The maintenance log showed increasing negligence, missed shifts, and hostile interactions with staff. Each incident was carefully documented and added to his personnel file. One afternoon, Olivia burst into Danny's office, her perfectly maintained facade cracking. "You destroyed my business," she accused. "Those blogs, the anonymous sources, it was you." Danny didn't look up from his computer. "Your business destroyed itself, Olivia. Quality speaks for itself, doesn't it? I had contracts with major retailers. Sponsorship deals." At being the operative word, Danny finally met her gaze. It's amazing how quickly companies distance themselves from fraud allegations. Olivia sank into a chair, her handbag sliding to the floor. "What do you want from me?" "Want?" Danny raised an eyebrow. "I don't want anything from you, Olivia. I'm simply ensuring that actions have consequences." "Blake can't support us anymore," she admitted. "The maintenance job barely covers our mortgage. We're drowning in debt." "That sounds like a personal problem," Danny replied. "Though I hear the young tennis instructor you've been seeing has quite a lucrative career ahead of him." Olivia's face paled. "How did you?" "Please," Danny waved dismissively. "Did you think I wouldn't notice your afternoon tennis lessons with someone half Blake's age? The question is, does Blake know?" Tears streaked Olivia's expensive makeup. "You're going to tell him?" "No." Danny leaned back in his chair. "You are. Eventually. When the pressure becomes too much, when the debt collectors won't stop calling, when he demands to know where you spend your afternoons, you'll tell him yourself." After she left, Cassie entered through their connecting door. The construction team found more problems with Blake's modifications to the Henderson project. The support beams he approved don't meet code requirements. "Document everything," Danny instructed. "Forward the reports to the city inspector's office." "This could shut down the entire project," Cassie warned. "Temporarily," Danny agreed. "But when we fix it properly this time, we'll be heroes. The company that puts safety above profit." The next week, local news stations ran stories about Hayes Enterprises' commitment to public safety after the company voluntarily halted construction to address structural concerns. Danny gave interviews emphasizing the new management's dedication to quality and transparency. Blake watched the coverage from his small office, rage building as his brother's reputation soared while his own life crumbled. His phone buzzed constantly with collection notices. Olivia's failed business venture had cost them their savings. The country club had revoked their membership due to unpaid dues. In desperation, Blake tried to contact their father, but Richard Hayes refused his calls. The family had closed ranks around Danny, leaving Blake and Olivia isolated. Late one night, as Danny reviewed company reports, his security team alerted him to an interesting development. Blake had been seen meeting with executives from a rival construction firm. "Should we intervene?" the head of security asked. "No," Danny decided. "Let him think he's being clever. Monitor the situation, but don't interfere." He pulled up the surveillance photos on his computer, Blake in a cheap suit, trying to maintain his old confidence as he pitched himself to his former competitors. The rival firm's executive's body language showed clear dismissal. "Your brother tried to sell them information about our projects," his investigator reported. "They turned him down. Apparently, his reputation for cutting corners has spread through the industry." Danny smiled, remembering Arthur's lessons about reputation. A man's name is his most valuable asset. Once it's tarnished, all doors close, even those he thought would always welcome him. The pressure was building. Blake's desperate moves, Olivia's crumbling facade, their mounting debts. All pieces moving exactly as Danny had planned. You're destroying them systematically, Cassie observed as they worked late one evening. They destroyed themselves, Danny corrected. I'm just making sure they can't hide from the consequences anymore. He pulled up the latest financial reports. Hayes Enterprises stock had risen 15% since he took control. The Henderson project, despite the setbacks, was gaining national attention for its innovative approach to urban renewal. What happens when they break? Cassie asked quietly. Danny thought about Blake's growing desperation, about Olivia's secret affair, about the inevitable collapse of their carefully constructed lives. They'll try something reckless, he predicted. And when they do, everything they've managed to hold on to will finally slip away. The game was progressing perfectly. Each move calculated, each consequence anticipated. Danny had learned patience during his exile, had mastered the art of watching his enemies destroy themselves. The screws were turning, and soon, very soon, they would tighten beyond endurance. Chapter 6. Descent into Darkness. Blake Hayes sat in his cramped maintenance office, staring at another collection notice. His hands shook as he reached for the bottle hidden in his bottom drawer. 3 months of watching his life unravel had taken their toll. His phone buzzed, another text from Olivia, credit card declined. Again. Fix this. He hurled the phone against the wall, the screen cracking on impact. The maintenance crew outside his office fell silent at the noise, then resumed their work with deliberate focus. They'd grown accustomed to their supervisor's outbursts. Mr. Hayes? One of the janitors knocked hesitantly. There's a problem with the sprinkler system in the East Wing. Handle it yourself, Blake snapped. I'm busy. But sir, the tenants are complaining. I said handle it. Blake's voice cracked with barely controlled rage. The janitor retreated. Already composing an incident report for HR, Blake had accumulated quite a file of similar complaints over the past months. At home that evening, Blake found Olivia surrounded by shopping bags, her eyes red from crying. They canceled my credit cards, she said without looking at him. All of them. The bank says our accounts are overdrawn. Maybe if you hadn't blown our savings on your failed fashion line. Don't you dare blame this on me. Olivia spun to face him. You're the one who lost everything. Your position, your reputation, your father's respect. Shut up. Blake grabbed a crystal vase, a wedding gift from his parents, and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, water and flowers spraying across their imported wallpaper. Olivia didn't flinch. You're pathetic, she spat. You can't even control your temper, let alone manage a maintenance department. Where were you this afternoon? Blake demanded, sudden suspicion clouding his mind. Your tennis lesson ended at 2, but you didn't come home until 6. Olivia's expression flickered guilt. Fear? I had errands to run. Errands? Blake laughed bitterly. Like meeting that tennis instructor at the Marina Hotel? The color drained from Olivia's face. You had me followed? I didn't have to. The hotel manager is an old friend, one of the few who still takes my calls. Blake advanced on her. How long, Olivia? How long have you been sleeping with him? Long enough to remember what it feels like to be with a real man. Olivia lifted her chin defiantly. Not a drunken failure living on his brother's charity. Blake raised his hand, but Olivia was already moving past him, grabbing her purse. Hit me, she challenged. Give me another reason to destroy you. She slammed the door behind her, leaving Blake alone with his rage and humiliation. He returned to his hidden bottle, drinking directly from it as he scrolled through his phone's contacts. Most numbers were blocked or disconnected, former friends and colleagues who'd abandoned him after his fall. One number caught his eye, Marcus Chun, VP of Operations at River City Construction, Hayes Enterprises' main competitor. They'd met recently, but Chun had dismissed Blake's offer to share inside information about Hayes' projects. Blake dialed, desperation overriding caution. The Henderson project, he slurred when Chun answered. I know how to stop it. Permanently. Blake? Chun sounded wary. Have you been drinking? Listen to me. Danny's fixing my mistakes, making me look worse with each repair. But what if something happened that couldn't be fixed? Something that would ruin his precious reputation? I'm hanging up now. I know people. Blake pressed on. Guys will do anything for the right price. One night, That's all it would take. Some strategic damage to the support structures. Maybe a small fire. Are you suggesting sabotage? Chen's voice sharpened. This call is being recorded, Blake. For your own sake, stop talking. The line went dead. Blake stared at his phone, realizing too late what he'd done. But instead of fear, he felt a strange clarity. Chen would report the call to Danny. His brother's network of spies ensured that. But maybe that was good. Maybe it was time to show Danny that he wasn't the only one who could play dirty. He made another call, this time to a number he'd gotten from one of his maintenance workers. The man had bragged about friends who could handle problems for the right price. I need a job done, Blake said when a gruff voice answered. It's about sending a message. They arranged to meet at a bar on the outskirts of town. Blake listened as the man, who called himself Jack, outlined how they could infiltrate the construction site, where to place the explosives for maximum damage. No one gets hurt, Blake insisted. This is about property damage, nothing more. Jack nodded, but his eyes said he'd do whatever the money required. They settled on a price that would drain the last of Blake's hidden savings. What Blake didn't notice was the small red light blinking under their table, or the bartender who seemed unusually interested in their conversation. Danny's surveillance network was comprehensive, his preparations thorough. The next day, Blake arrived at the construction site late at night, meeting Jack and his crew. They were dressed as maintenance workers, carrying tool bags filled with explosives. Remember, Blake whispered as they approached the security gate, we're here to check the electrical systems. I have access codes. Floodlights blazed to life, illuminating the site. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Blake Hayes, Danny's voice came through a megaphone. Step away from the building and put your hands where we can see them. Blake spun around, searching for his brother in the glare of the lights. Jack and his crew were already running, abandoning their equipment. It's over, Blake. Danny emerged from the shadows, Cassie beside him. We have your conversation with Chun on tape. You're meeting with Jack, who works for my security team, by the way. The explosives in those bags. You're finished? Police cars surrounded the site. Officers approached with weapons drawn. Blake saw his whole life crumbling before him. Not slowly this time, but in one catastrophic moment. You set me up? He accused as the officers handcuffed him. You pushed me to this. No, brother. Danny's voice was cold. You did this to yourself. Just like everything else. As Blake was led away, Cassie touched Danny's arm. Olivia's gone. She emptied their joint account and booked a flight to Europe. Danny nodded. Make sure the police have her details. She's as complicit in this as he is. The next morning's headlines screamed about the attempted sabotage. Blake's arrest photos showed a broken man, his clothes replaced by prison orange. Olivia was detained at the airport, her escape thwarted before it began. Danny stood in his office, watching the media coverage. The reporting painted Hayes Enterprises as the victim of desperate sabotage, their commitment to safety and quality highlighted by the contrast with Blake's actions. The board is meeting in an hour, Cassie reminded him. They'll want to discuss damage control. There's no damage to control, Danny replied. Everything happened exactly as planned. He turned away from the screens, from the images of his brother's downfall. Act 2 of his revenge was complete, but he felt no satisfaction, no triumph. Only a cold certainty that justice had finally been served. The game of shadows was over. The light had won. Chapter 7. The Price of Betrayal. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Blake Hayes stood for sentencing. His suit had been replaced by prison orange, his confident posture reduced to a defeated slump. Danny sat in the back row, observing the culmination of his carefully orchestrated revenge. Mr. Hayes, the judge addressed Blake, your actions show a disturbing pattern of malicious intent. The attempted sabotage of the Henderson Project could have endangered countless lives. Blake's attorney attempted one final plea. Your Honor, my client was under extreme emotional and financial stress. His actions, while inexcusable, were born from desperation rather than genuine criminal intent. Desperation? The judge shuffled through the case files. Mr. Hayes attempted to hire criminals to destroy a construction site. He leaked confidential information to competitors. He violated multiple terms of his employment contract. This wasn't desperation. This was calculated malice. The sentence came down: 5 years in state prison, with possibility of parole after 3 years. As the bailiff led Blake away, he caught Danny's eye. The hatred in his brother's gaze had been replaced by something else: defeat, perhaps even a glimmer of understanding. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around Danny. "Mr. Hayesworth, how do you feel about your brother's sentence? Will Hayes Enterprises press additional civil charges?" Danny raised his hand for silence. Hayes Enterprises' focus remains on serving our community through responsible development. My brother's actions are a personal tragedy, but they won't deter us from our mission. Cassie appeared at his side, her presence steadying. "Mr. Hayesworth has no further comments. Please direct any questions about the Henderson project to our PR department." Back at Hayes Enterprises, Danny found an unexpected visitor in his office. Olivia sat in one of his guest chairs, her clothes noticeably less pristine than usual, her makeup failing to hide the strain of recent weeks. "Come to provide more evidence against Blake?" Danny asked, taking a seat. "I've given you everything I know." Olivia's voice cracked. I need help, Danny. Nobody will hire me. My accounts are frozen. I can't even rent an apartment without someone questioning my involvement in Blake's crimes." Danny studied her. This woman who had once been his wife, who had shattered his trust and helped destroy his life. "What exactly do you want from me, Olivia?" "I want a chance," she whispered. "A chance to rebuild like you did. I'm not asking for money or favors. Just don't block me at every turn. Please." "You had chances," Danny replied. "You had a husband who loved you, a comfortable life, opportunities to build something meaningful. You chose differently." Tears streaked Olivia's makeup. "I know. I made terrible choices. But does that mean I deserve to lose everything?" "No." Danny's voice softened slightly. "It means you need to learn what it's like to build something from nothing, to earn trust rather than exploit it." He opened his laptop, typed briefly. "There's a women's support organization downtown. They help people restart their lives. I've arranged for them to contact you." Olivia stood, clutching her purse. "Why would you help me at all?" "Because destroying you won't undo what happened," Danny said. "But watching you learn from your mistakes, that might be worth something." After she left, Cassie entered through their connecting door. "That was unexpected, was it?" Danny turned to face her. Olivia always knew how to play the victim when it suited her. "And the support organization? Is that part of some larger plan?" Danny shook his head. "No more plans. No more schemes. They've paid for their betrayal. Now it's time to focus on building something better." The next few weeks brought significant changes to Hayes Enterprises. Danny implemented new community outreach programs, established a foundation for sustainable urban development, and created mentorship opportunities for young architects and engineers. One morning, his secretary announced an unusual visitor: the prison warden from Blake's facility. "Mr. Hayesworth," the warden began, "your brother has been a model inmate. He's enrolled in therapy, takes responsibility for his actions, and helps teach business classes to other inmates. Why are you telling me this?" "Because he's eligible for family visitation, and you're the only one who hasn't completely abandoned him." Danny leaned back, considering. Arthur Sterling's voice echoed in his memory. "True power isn't in destroying your enemies, but in deciding their fate once they're defeated." The prison visiting room was sparse and institutional. Blake sat at a metal table, his prison uniform neat, his posture subdued but not broken. "I didn't expect you to come," Blake said as Danny sat across from him. "Neither did I," Danny admitted. "The warden says you're doing well." Blake's laugh was hollow. "Define well? I'm in prison, divorced, bankrupt, and disgraced. But," he paused, "I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years." "What do you think about?" "How I became this person. How I could betray my own brother out of jealousy and pride." Blake met Danny's gaze. "I've had a lot of time to remember who I used to be, before I let greed and ambition corrupt me." Danny studied his brother, looking for signs of manipulation or deceit. He found none. "And who are you now?" "Someone who wants to make amends," Blake replied. "Not to regain what I lost, that's impossible, but to become someone better than I was." They talked for an hour about their childhood, their parents, the company. Blake asked about the Henderson project, showing genuine interest in its progress. As the visit ended, Danny made a decision. When you're released, there might be a place for you. Not at Hayes Enterprises, that bridge is burned. But I have connections with organizations that help ex-offenders rebuild their lives. Blake's eyes widened. You do that? After everything, consider it an investment, Danny said. In the person you're trying to become. Later that night, Danny sat with Cassie in his office, sharing the day's events. Are you sure about helping them? She asked. Both Blake and Olivia? Danny moved to the window, looking out at the city he was helping to rebuild. Revenge was never the end goal, Cassie. It was about justice, about consequences. They've faced those consequences. Now it's about what comes next. Cassie joined him at the window, her hand finding his. And what comes next for us? Danny turned to her, seeing in her eyes the same strength and integrity that had drawn him to her from the beginning. Something better than revenge. Something we build together. The city lights sparkled below them, a testament to the power of transformation and renewal. Danny had achieved his revenge, but he'd also discovered something more valuable. The ability to move beyond it, to create rather than destroy. The price of betrayal had been paid. Now it was time to write a different story. Chapter 8. Echoes of the Past. Danny sat in his childhood home study, facing his parents across his father's antique desk. The room held memories of countless family meetings, business discussions, and painful confrontations. Now it would witness one more crucial conversation. You wanted to talk, Richard Hayes said, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken regrets. Yes, Danny replied. About Blake, about the past, about everything that led us here. Margaret Hayes gripped her husband's hand. We've made so many mistakes, Danny. With both of you. That's why I'm here. Danny leaned forward. I need to understand. Why Blake? Why did you always choose him? Richard shifted uncomfortably. He was our firstborn. He had this natural charm, this ability to make people believe in him. You thought he was the perfect heir, Danny finished. While I was the backup plan, we were wrong. Margaret's voice broke. So terribly wrong. We saw what we wanted to see in Blake, ignored his flaws, his manipulation. And we overlooked your strength, your integrity. Do you know what it did to me? Danny's voice remained steady, but his hands clenched. Each time you praised his charisma while dismissing my hard work, each time you excused his mistakes while demanding perfection from me. Richard stood, moving to the window. I built Hayes Enterprises from nothing. I thought Blake had my drive, my ambition. Instead, he had my worst traits, my pride, my need for control. You, Danny, you had the qualities that really mattered. The patience to build something lasting, the wisdom to lead with integrity. We can't change the past, Margaret added, but we want you to know how proud we are of the man you've become. Not because of your success or wealth, but because of how you've handled everything. Even your revenge. Danny raised an eyebrow. You know about that? Of course we do. Richard turned back from the window. You orchestrated Blake's downfall perfectly, legally, ethically, giving him exactly the consequences he deserved. No shortcuts, no cheap shots. You beat him at his own game while maintaining your principles. And now you're helping him rebuild, Margaret added. That takes a strength neither your father nor I possess. Danny stood pacing the study. I visited him again yesterday. He's different now, humbled, reflective. The therapy seems to be working. Will you really help him when he's released? Richard asked. Yes, Danny nodded. Not for him, initially. For me. I need to know I can move past this, that I'm not bound by bitterness anymore. Margaret moved to him, tentatively reaching for his hand. You're a better person than we deserved as parents. I learned from your mistakes, Danny said, but his voice held no malice. And I'll teach my own children differently. Richard's head snapped up. Children? Are you and Cassie? Not yet, Danny smiled slightly. But we're discussing it, along with other future plans. The conversation shifted, moving from past wounds to future hopes. They talked about Hayes Enterprises community initiatives, about Danny's vision for sustainable development, about his growing relationship with Cassie. As the evening drew to a close, Richard pulled a small box from his desk. I've been waiting for the right moment to give you this. Inside lay his father's prized watch, a family heirloom traditionally passed to the firstborn son. Dad, this was meant for Blake. No, Richard closed Danny's fingers around the box. It was meant for the son who would honor our family's legacy. That's you, Danny. It always was. The next day, Danny visited the Henderson Project site. The development was taking shape. Modern buildings designed with both aesthetic beauty and practical functionality. Green spaces integrated throughout. Community centers placed strategically to serve local residents. Cassie met him there, reviewing plans with the construction team. Her eyes lit up when she saw him, a reaction that still amazed him after everything they'd been through together. The community center is ahead of schedule, she reported, and the sustainable energy systems are exceeding our efficiency projections. Good, Danny surveyed the site. What about the affordable housing units? Ready for the first families next month. The selection committee is reviewing applications. They walked the site together, discussing modifications and improvements. Workers nodded respectfully as they passed, not out of fear, as they had with Blake, but out of genuine respect for Danny's leadership. I heard about your meeting with your parents, Cassie said as they reached a quiet spot. How did it go? Better than expected. We talked about Blake, about the past. They apologized, not just with words, but with understanding. Cassie touched his arm. And how do you feel about it? Lighter, Danny admitted. Like I've set down a weight I didn't realize I was still carrying. They watched as workers installed solar panels on the community center's roof, another of Cassie's innovations. The building would be entirely self-sufficient, a model of sustainable design. Blake's hearing is next week, Danny mentioned, for early release based on good behavior. Will you support it? Yes. He served 18 months, shown genuine remorse, helped other inmates. The warden says he's one of their success stories. Cassie studied his face. And Olivia? The women's organization reports she's working hard, taking classes in social work. She stopped chasing fame and luxury, started volunteering at a domestic violence shelter. People can change, Cassie observed. They can, Danny agreed, if they want it badly enough. That evening, they had dinner with Arthur Sterling at his estate. The mentor who had guided Danny's transformation was pleased with his protege's evolution. Revenge is easy, Arthur said as they discussed recent events. Forgiveness, true forgiveness, earned through accountability and growth. That's the real challenge. Did you ever forgive your own enemies? Danny asked. Arthur's eyes twinkled. Some of them became my closest allies. Others, well, let's say they served as excellent learning opportunities. As they drove home, Danny and Cassie discussed their own future plans. The wedding would be small, intimate, a celebration of their partnership rather than a social spectacle. They would expand Hayes Enterprises' community initiatives, create more opportunities for sustainable development. You're not just rebuilding buildings, Cassie noted. You're rebuilding relationships, communities, lives. Danny thought about Blake in prison, working to reform himself. About Olivia at the women's shelter, learning to serve others instead of herself. About his parents, finally seeing him for who he truly was. Sometimes the strongest structures, he replied, are built on the foundations of what we thought was destroyed. The city spread out before them, a testament to the power of transformation. Danny had achieved his revenge, but he discovered something far more valuable. The ability to build something new from the ashes of betrayal. Chapter 9. The Legacy of Daniel Haysworth. Danny adjusted his tie in the mirror, Cassie's reflection appearing behind him. Her wedding dress was elegant and understated, much like the intimate ceremony they'd planned. Ready? She asked, slipping her hand into his. More than ready, he replied, turning to face her. Though I'm not sure about the guest list. Blake stood in the small chapel, accompanied by his counselor from the rehabilitation program. After serving 2 years of his sentence, he'd earned early release through exemplary behavior and dedication to reform. Now he watched as his brother prepared to begin a new chapter. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Danny and Cassie exchanged vows they'd written themselves, speaking of trust, partnership, and building a future together. Their guests, a select group of family, friends, and key employees, witnessed the union of two people who had found strength in each other. During the reception, Blake approached the newlyweds. "Thank you for inviting me," he said, his humility genuine. "I know I didn't deserve it." "You're here because you've earned a second chance," Danny replied. "Your actions since prison show that." Blake nodded toward a table where Olivia sat with representatives from the women's shelter. "She's different too. We talked earlier, really talked for the first time in years, about our mistakes, our selfishness." Danny observed his ex-wife, noting the absence of labels and excessive jewelry. She wore simple professional attire, her demeanor more grounded than he'd ever seen it. "The shelter director says she's their most dedicated volunteer," Cassie mentioned. "She's applying for a position as a counselor." The reception continued, a celebration not just of Danny and Cassie's marriage, but of transformation and renewal. Richard and Margaret Hayes watched their son with pride, finally understanding the strength they'd overlooked for so many years. 6 months later, Danny stood before the Hayes Enterprises board, presenting his vision for the company's future. The Henderson Project had become a model of sustainable urban development, attracting national attention and numerous awards. "Our next phase," he explained, indicating the plans displayed on screens around the room, "involves expanding our community initiative program. We're establishing a foundation to support affordable housing projects across 3 states." Cassie, now Chief Innovation Officer, detailed the technical aspects. Their partnership had grown stronger through their marriage, each complementing the other's strengths. "Additionally," she continued, "we're launching an apprenticeship program for at-risk youth, teaching them construction and design skills." Blake, who now worked with a prisoner rehabilitation nonprofit, had helped design the program based on his experiences. His small organization partnered with Hayes Enterprises to provide opportunities for former inmates seeking to rebuild their lives. That evening, Danny visited a local community center built as part of the Henderson Project. Children played in the safe, modern facility while their parents attended job training classes or community meetings. Olivia was there, leading a support group for women rebuilding their lives after difficult relationships. She nodded to Danny as he passed, a gesture of mutual respect between two people who had found purpose beyond their past conflicts. "Mr. Hayesworth?" A young architect in turn approached him. "I wanted to thank you for the apprenticeship opportunity. Your program changed my life." Danny remembered his own journey, the lessons learned through hardship and triumph. "Build something meaningful," he advised the intern, "something that serves others. That's how we create lasting change." Later that night, Danny and Cassie sat in their home office, reviewing plans for their next project. Her hand rested on her growing belly. Their first child, a daughter, would arrive in 3 months. "What shall we name her?" Cassie asked, not for the first time. Danny thought about legacy, about the future they were building. "Something that represents hope," he suggested. "New beginnings." Like her father, Cassie smiled. The man who turned revenge into redemption. They discussed their plans for raising their child, the values they would instill, the examples they would set. Their daughter would grow up understanding the importance of integrity, compassion, and the power of transformation. Years passed. Hayes Enterprises expanded its influence, not through aggressive takeovers, but through innovative community development. The company became known for its ethical practices and commitment to sustainable growth. Blake found his calling in advocacy work, using his experiences to help others avoid the paths he'd taken. He married a fellow counselor, building a life focused on service rather than status. Olivia rose to become director of the women's shelter, her understanding of transformation helping countless others find their way back from loss and betrayal. Danny watched it all from his office in the Hayes building, now a landmark of responsible urban development. His daughter, growing into a thoughtful and compassionate young woman, often joined him there, learning the business from both her parents. One evening, as the city lights twinkled below, Danny reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed him had instead forged him into someone stronger, wiser, more capable of genuine leadership. Lost in thought, Cassie entered, carrying blueprints for their newest project. "Thinking about legacy," Danny replied, "about how the worst moments in our lives can lead to the best transformations. They stood together, looking out at the city they'd helped reshape. The Henderson Project had sparked a revolution in urban development, inspiring similar initiatives across the country. Their daughter burst in, excited about a new sustainable design concept she'd developed. Danny saw in her the perfect blend of his determination and Cassie's innovation, untainted by the bitterness that had once driven him. "Dad," she said, spreading her drawings across his desk, "I think I've found a way to make the new community center completely self-sustaining." Danny shared a smile with Cassie. This was his true legacy. Not the buildings he'd constructed or the revenge he'd orchestrated, but the future he'd helped build. A future based on healing rather than hatred, growth rather than revenge. The man who had once been consumed by betrayal had become a builder of dreams, a creator of opportunities, a symbol of the power of transformation. Daniel Haysworth had achieved everything he'd set out to do, and in the process, had discovered a truth more valuable than vengeance. The greatest revenge was not in destroying one's enemies, but in building something so magnificent that the past became merely a foundation for future greatness. Epilogue, 20 years later. Daniel Haysworth stood at the podium of the newly completed Hayes Innovation Center, addressing a crowd of business leaders, community members, and press. At 62, his hair had grayed at the temples, but his presence remained commanding, his voice carrying the same quiet authority that had defined his leadership. 20 years ago, he began, Hayes Enterprises made a commitment to sustainable development and community empowerment. Today, we celebrate not just this building, but the thousands of lives transformed through our initiatives. In the front row, his daughter Emma, now 25, watched with pride. She had inherited both her father's business acumen and her mother's innovative spirit, already making her mark as Hayes Enterprises Director of Sustainable Development. Cassie, elegant at 58, sat beside their daughter. Her architectural designs had revolutionized sustainable building practices, earning her numerous awards and accolades. But her greatest pride was in the mentorship program she'd established, guiding young architects from underprivileged backgrounds. The Innovation Center, Danny continued, represents our continued commitment to the future. Its doors will be open to entrepreneurs, community organizations, and educational programs. This is not just a building, it's an incubator for dreams. He gestured to a familiar figure in the audience, Blake Hayes, now in his mid-60s, who had found his true calling in prisoner rehabilitation work. After his release, Blake had built a successful nonprofit organization, Second Chance Initiative, which had helped thousands of former inmates reintegrate into society. Blake's own transformation had become a powerful testimony. He regularly spoke at prisons and rehabilitation centers, sharing his story of redemption. His marriage to Sarah, a counselor he'd met through his work, had given him the stable, meaningful relationship he'd never had with Olivia. Our partnership with Second Chance Initiative, Danny acknowledged, has provided career training to over 5,000 individuals in the past 15 years. 80% of them are now employed in sustainable construction or related fields. Blake nodded in recognition, his hand clasped with Sarah's. Their teenage son, Michael, sat beside them, a thoughtful young man who shared his father's charisma but had inherited his mother's compassion and wisdom. The ceremony continued with presentations from various community leaders. Among them was Olivia, who had risen to become a nationally recognized advocate for women's empowerment. Her work with domestic violence survivors had earned her numerous humanitarian awards, and the shelter she directed had become a model for similar programs across the country. After her public disgrace and subsequent transformation, Olivia had found purpose in helping others rebuild their lives. She'd never remarried, instead dedicating herself to her work. The materialistic woman who had once betrayed Danny was unrecognizable in the composed, purpose-driven leader she'd become. As Danny concluded his speech, he invited Emma to join him at the podium. The future of Hayes Enterprises, he announced, rests in the capable hands of the next generation. My daughter Emma will be assuming the role of CEO next month, while I transition to chairman of the board. Emma stepped forward, her presence a perfect blend of her parents' best qualities. Our commitment, she declared, is not just a sustainable building, but to sustainable communities. The Innovation Center, will house our new climate action initiative, developing solutions for environmental challenges while creating green jobs. The audience applauded, many remembering how they'd watched Emma grow up, attending community meetings with her parents, learning the business from the ground up. She'd earned her position through merit, working her way through various departments and proving her capabilities. After the ceremony, the family gathered for a private dinner at Danny and Cassie's home. Arthur Sterling, now in his 90s but still sharp-minded, joined them. He'd become a grandfather figure to Emma, his strategic wisdom helping guide her development as a leader. "Did you ever imagine," Arthur asked Danny, "when you were plotting your revenge all those years ago, that it would lead to this?" Danny looked around the table, at Cassie, his partner in both life and innovation, at Emma, their greatest collaboration, at Blake and his family, proof that redemption was possible, at Olivia, who had found her own path to meaning. "No," he admitted. "I was focused on justice, on consequences. I never dreamed that the consequences would be so constructive." The conversation flowed easily, touching on both past and future. Blake's nonprofit was expanding its programs to include environmental restoration projects, providing green job training to former inmates. Sarah had developed a trauma-informed counseling program that was being adopted by rehabilitation centers nationwide. Their son, Michael, despite having opportunities in the business world, had chosen to study social work, wanting to continue his parents' legacy of helping others rebuild their lives. Olivia shared news about her shelter's latest initiative, a partnership with Hayes Enterprises to provide job training in sustainable construction to women rebuilding their lives. The program, originally Emma's idea, combined economic empowerment with environmental responsibility. Richard and Margaret Hayes had passed away several years earlier, but not before seeing their family heal and grow stronger through adversity. They'd lived to witness Blake's redemption, Danny's triumph, and Emma's early achievements. As the evening progressed, Emma shared her vision for Hayes Enterprises' future. Under her leadership, the company would expand its focus on climate resilience, developing innovative solutions for communities threatened by environmental changes. "The challenges ahead," she explained, "require more than just sustainable building. We need to create adaptive communities, resilient infrastructures. The Innovation Center is just the beginning." Cassie beamed with pride. Her daughter had inherited Danny's strategic mind and her own innovative spirit, but had developed something uniquely her own, a vision that extended beyond profit or prestige to the fundamental challenges facing humanity. Later that night, after their guests had departed, Danny and Cassie stood in their garden, which offered a view of the city they'd helped transform. The Henderson Project had sparked a revolution in urban development, its principles now replicated in cities worldwide. "Remember when you first came to Hayes Enterprises?" Danny asked his wife. "Fighting over design specifications, challenging each other's ideas?" Cassie laughed. "Who would have thought those arguments would lead to this? A marriage, a daughter, a legacy of positive change. The best kind of revenge," Danny mused, "is becoming someone better than your enemies believe possible." The next morning, Danny visited the Hayes Innovation Center early, before the public opening. He walked through the soaring atrium, its design incorporating Cassie's latest innovations in sustainable architecture. Solar panels and vertical gardens integrated seamlessly with the structure, making the building not just environmentally neutral, but regenerative. In the community space, he found Emma reviewing plans with her team. The Climate Action Initiative would occupy the top floors, bringing together scientists, entrepreneurs, and community leaders to develop solutions for environmental challenges. "Dad," she greeted him, "we've just received confirmation. The UN wants to use our community development model as a template for climate resilience projects in developing nations." Danny felt a surge of pride. His daughter had taken their family legacy of construction and transformation and elevated it to address global challenges. The company he'd fought to reclaim had become a force for positive change far beyond anything he'd imagined. Later that day, he attended a graduation ceremony at one of Blake's rehabilitation centers. The graduates included former inmates who'd completed training in sustainable construction through Hayes Enterprises programs. Many would go on to work on community development projects, their own stories of transformation contributing to the larger narrative of renewal. Blake's speech to the graduates reflected how far he'd come from the manipulative, self-centered man he'd once been. "Your past mistakes don't define you," he told them. "What defines you is how you use those experiences to create positive change." Danny thought about the long journey that had brought them all to this point. The betrayal that had sparked his quest for revenge had ultimately led to something far more valuable, a legacy of transformation that extended far beyond personal vindication. The Hayes name, once associated with family drama and corporate intrigue, now stood for innovation, sustainability, and social responsibility. The company's projects had revitalized communities, created opportunities, and demonstrated that profitable business could be a force for positive change. As he watched the graduates receive their certificates, Danny reflected on the true meaning of success. It wasn't in destroying enemies or accumulating power, but in creating opportunities for others to transform their lives, just as he had transformed his own. Emma joined him after the ceremony, discussing plans for integrating more graduates into the company's upcoming projects. Her leadership style combined her father's strategic thinking with a genuine passion for social impact. "You know, Dad," she said, "I used to think our family story was about revenge and redemption. But now I see it's really about the power of transformation. Not just personal transformation, but the ability to transform communities, to create positive change from negative experiences." Danny nodded, thinking of all the lives touched by their work. The families housed in sustainable communities, the former inmates building new careers, the women rebuilding their lives through Olivia's programs. "The best legacy," he replied, "is one that grows beyond us, that continues to create positive change even when we're gone." As they left the rehabilitation center, they passed a wall of photographs showing graduates working on various Hayes Enterprises projects. Each image told a story of transformation: personal, professional, communal. The sun was setting over the city, its light reflecting off the solar panels and green spaces that had become hallmarks of Hayes developments. Danny thought about the young man he'd been, consumed by the need for revenge, and marveled at how that darkness had led to so much light. His phone buzzed with a message from Cassie. Their grandchild, Emma's first, had just been born. As they rushed to the hospital, Danny felt the circle of transformation completing itself. A new generation would carry forward their legacy of positive change, building on the foundation that had emerged from the ashes of betrayal. In the hospital room, holding his grandson while Emma rested, Danny whispered a promise. "Your story begins with hope, not hurt. With possibility, not revenge. You are the next chapter in a legacy of transformation." The city spread out beyond the hospital windows, a testament to the power of turning pain into purpose, betrayal into blessing. The Hayes legacy would continue, not as a tale of revenge, but as an ongoing story of transformation and renewal, touching lives for generations to come. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.